Have you ever wondered, deep down in your mind, why it seems so exhausting to be good all the time? Have you ever felt that something is wrong with living in a constant attempt to please, to be blameless, to never make mistakes? Well, I need to tell you something that perhaps no one has ever had the courage to say. This obsession of yours to be perfect, to always behave in the right way, may be destroying you inside, much more than any failure ever could. You who are trying to control every word, every gesture, every thought, so as not to disappoint anyone. You who think you need to swallow your anger, stifle your desire, hide your envy, to remain worthy of love, respect, acceptance. How many times have you silenced your truth, afraid of seeming selfish, ungrateful, or less spiritual? How many times have you smiled when everything inside you wanted to cry? How many times have you offered help when in reality you desperately needed to be helped? I know. I know because millions live this way, trapped in an invisible trap. A prison made not of iron bars, but of silent rules that teach us that we must always be good, generous, humble, altruistic. And yes, I know these words sound beautiful. But Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most relentless philosophers the world has ever seen, saw something deeply disturbing in them. Constant goodness may just be a mask. Schopenhauer said that there is something stronger than all our moral convictions, the will. A blind, powerful, selfish force that moves us even when we pretend to be above it. He believed that by trying to suppress this will, by incessantly fighting to be perfect, you do not become a better person. You become fragmented. You split into two, the one who feels and the one who pretends. And this division creates suffering. A silent suffering that you carry alone while everyone praises how good you are. And here is the truth that few have the courage to face. Often, all this virtue, this sweetness, this infinite patience, is not altruism. They are desperate attempts to control the image others have of you. They are strategies to ensure approval, to avoid the terror of rejection, to not have to face your own darkness. And the more you force this goodness, the more a hidden, poisonous resentment grows inside you. A bitterness that you do not dare to admit even to yourself, because that would be to admit that your goodness has a price, that it expects something in return. But I want to ask you an honest question. What good is it to be loved by everyone if you cannot even love yourself? What good is it to be seen as a wonderful person if you live exhausted, crushed under the weight of your own expectations, living in a theater where your true essence never steps on stage? Perhaps no one has told you, but Schopenhauer believed that true compassion does not arise from the conscious effort to be good. It emerges when we accept who we truly are, including the ugly, selfish, imperfect parts. When we let the masks fall, something genuine is born, the realization that we all share the same pain of existence. And only then are we capable of acts of kindness that require nothing in return, that flow naturally like water from a spring. So if you feel that being good all the time is like carrying invisible chains, I invite you to stay with me until the end of this video. Because today I want to show you that the pursuit of moral perfection may be your greatest prison, and that the key to true freedom lies precisely in embracing your imperfection. Since childhood, you have heard that you should be good, a good child, a good student, a good friend, a good professional. Being good has become not just a quality, but a moral obligation. It's as if there is an invisible voice that constantly whispers in your ear, "Be kind, be understanding, swallow your pride. Think of others first, be strong, don't show weakness, and above all, don't let anyone see the ugly side of you." The problem is that no one ever told you the other side of this story. No one told you that this ideal of absolute goodness can be one of the cruelest prisons you will ever know. You start believing that you are just being a good person, but without realizing it, You begin to shape every gesture, every word, every expression on your face to fit the mold of what others expect from you. How many times have you found yourself saying yes when everything inside you was screaming no? How many times have you tolerated offenses, unfair criticism, or emotional abuse just to avoid seeming aggressive, selfish, or ungrateful? How many times have you stayed silent because you were afraid of being seen as someone difficult, complicated, bitter? You were trained to think that being good means to be silent, to endure, to forgive, to yield, always. And in the process, you learn to ignore your own voice. The myth of perfect goodness creates a vicious cycle. You start measuring your worth based on how much you please others. Every compliment becomes fuel to continue in this role. But every little criticism or disapproval feels like a stab. You begin to live on an emotional seesaw. If you are approved, you feel worthy. If you are disapproved, you feel worthless. This is not virtue. This is slavery. Arthur Schopenhauer saw all of this with brutal clarity. He believed that human will, this unconscious and incessant force that drives us, is selfish by nature. There is no human being who does not carry within them their own desires, impulses, and interests. Trying to kill this will in the name of absolute moral purity is like trying to extinguish fire with gasoline. The more you repress, the stronger it becomes in the depths of your mind. And that's where the danger lies, because this artificial kindness you cultivate is often not real altruism. It is a survival strategy. It is your way of avoiding rejection. It is your method of keeping people close, of maintaining control over the image they have of you. It is, at its core, a currency of exchange. You give kindness, expecting acceptance. You offer patience, expecting love. You swallow anger, expecting respect. But there is a very high price for all of this. Because while you pretend to have no needs, wants, or flaws, something inside you is dying. Your spontaneity, your authenticity, your ability to feel genuine joy are being suffocated by the obligation to appear perfect. You begin to live like an actor trapped in a role you can no longer bear to play. And when the curtain falls and you are alone, you feel an emptiness you cannot explain. I know that all of this is hard to hear, but it is necessary, because if you do not see this prison, you will spend your entire life sacrificing yourself to meet the expectations of people who may not even notice or value your effort. You will continue to smile while bleeding inside, just to maintain the illusion of being the good person everyone expects. But Schopenhauer offers us another lens to look at this story. A lens that reveals something even more disturbing, that all this excessive virtue may in fact be just the visible tip of something much deeper and darker. And that is exactly what we will talk about in the next part. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Now it is time to look without filters at a truth that almost no one has the courage to face. You are not good all the time. No one is. And that's okay. Because according to Arthur Schopenhauer, there is something much deeper and more powerful within us than any ideal of virtue. He called it will. A blind, relentless force that moves us without asking for permission. Schopenhauer believed that this will is the essence of everything that exists. Not only in human beings, but in all of nature. It is what makes the lion hunt, the tree grow towards the sun, the sea devour the stones of the coast. It is what makes you desire, want, feel hunger, thirst, lust, ambition. It is this force, raw and indifferent to morality, that is at the center of our existence. And here is the point that destroys any romantic illusion about human goodness. Schopenhauer said that will is, by nature, selfish. It does not care about moral rules, good manners, or purity of character. It only wants to satisfy its own impulses. Even when it seems that we are being altruistic, we are often just seeking deep down some personal benefit, whether it be recognition, gratitude, love, or simply the feeling of being good. Think with me. How many times have you done something supposedly good, but deep down were hoping for a thank you, a compliment, or even an emotional debt that the other person would owe you? How many times has your kindness not come accompanied, even if unconsciously, by a desire to be seen, admired, or loved? Schopenhauer would say, almost always. This does not mean that you are a bad person. It only means that you are human, and that within you exist forces that cannot simply be extinguished just because society says they are ugly or shameful. The great mistake, according to Schopenhauer, is to think that we can completely suppress this selfish will through rigid moral behavior. Because the more you repress it, the more it finds underground ways to express itself. Do you think you are being virtuous by swallowing your anger? Maybe. But sometimes you are just planting the seeds of resentment that one day will explode in the form of sarcasm, coldness, passive-aggressive attacks, or even psychosomatic illnesses. This will does not disappear just because you pretend it does not exist. It hides. And it is precisely when it is hidden that it becomes more dangerous, because you start to act automatically without realizing that your choices, your generosity, even your kindness may be contaminated by selfish desires that you refuse to acknowledge. And the result? A life of suffering, contradiction, and emotional wear. You feel good, but you also feel used. You want to be altruistic, but you resent it when you do not receive recognition. You take pride in your patience, but feel accumulated hatred in your chest. All of this because you are trying to live against something that is as natural as the act of breathing, your own will. Schopenhauer was not saying that we need to become selfish monsters. He was warning us about something much more subtle and true. True freedom is not in trying to kill the will, but in knowing it, facing it head-on, and learning to deal with it without deluding ourselves. And this leads us to an inevitable question. What happens when this will is repressed day after day in the name of goodness? What happens when you sacrifice everything to be seen as a good person? This is exactly what we will explore in the next part. It's time to talk about something that may hurt more than any truth we've addressed so far: self-sacrifice. This glorified idea that we are taught from a young age, as if it were the supreme virtue, but which, in reality, is often the shortest path to the destruction of our soul. How many times have you put the needs of others above your own? How many times have you ignored your limits, swallowed your exhaustion, hidden your sadness, just to maintain the title of good person? You wake up every day determined not to disappoint anyone, to be available, to give more than you receive, and you think you are acting out of generosity. But there is something much darker hidden in all of this. Arthur Schopenhauer saw this illusion with surgical clarity. For him, the constant act of self-sacrifice is not necessarily an act of virtue. Often, it is a symptom of emotional slavery. It is the will, that selfish force we discussed earlier, disguised as kindness. Because you see, when you sacrifice yourself all the time, you are almost always expecting something in return, even if you don't admit it to yourself. It could be gratitude, it could be recognition, it could simply be the feeling of maintaining control over how others see you. The problem is that this payment almost never comes, and when it doesn't come, something corrosive is born inside you: resentment. Schopenhauer spoke of this resentment as one of the most destructive forces of the human psyche. Because it is silent, disguised, treacherous, you keep smiling, keep helping, keep being kind. But inside, you are accumulating hurt. You are collecting small emotional bills that are never paid. And every thank you that doesn't come, every indifferent glance, every ingratitude becomes a nail in the coffin of your authenticity. You know that person who seems to be the most generous in the world, but who, at some point, explodes with anger or withdraws without explanation. That person who says with a trembling voice, "I do everything for you and no one appreciates me." Well, that's the trap of self-sacrifice. You spend so much time ignoring your own limits that, when the pressure finally becomes unbearable, the explosion comes and usually destroys relationships, reputations, and most importantly, your inner peace. And there's more. Schopenhauer warned us that this excessive virtue not only creates resentment, but also makes us emotionally manipulable. People who live in self-sacrifice become easy prey for those who know how to exploit others' guilt. You become that person who can't say no, who carries the weight of others' problems, who absorbs guilt that isn't yours. And little by little, you start to disappear. You cease to exist as an individual and begin to exist only as the function you perform in the lives of others. And here lies the cruelest point. Society admires and glorifies self-sacrifice. People say you are wonderful, altruistic, a model of generosity. But none of these people will be there when you are crying in the dark, exhausted, wondering why no one cares about you in the same way. Schopenhauer would say, there is no freedom in compulsive virtue, because it is just another way for the will to exert its dominance over you, this time using the mask of morality. You think you are acting for the good, but in reality, you are obeying impulses you do not understand. And the more you sacrifice yourself, the further you distance yourself from who you are. It's hard, I know, but it is necessary to open your eyes to this vicious cycle. Because if you do not see the price of self-sacrifice, you will remain trapped in it until the end of your days. And if you're wondering, so is every virtue false? Stay with me, because in the next part, we will talk about something even more unsettling. Maybe you are there, listening to me, thinking, okay, I understand that living in constant sacrifice is harmful, but I still believe that being good is noble, that cultivating virtue is the right thing to do. And I understand you, because the idea of goodness is beautiful, it is inspiring. But there is a brutal truth that almost no one has the courage to say out loud. Virtue can be used as an extremely sophisticated form of manipulation. Yes, manipulation. And I know that this word sounds dirty, offensive. But if you have the courage to look deep, you will realize that it is not uncommon for our supposed goodness to be laden with hidden intentions. Think with me. How many times have you been kind, not because you really wanted to, but because you knew it would create an emotional debt in the other person? How many times have you offered help, not out of pure generosity, but so that the other person would feel obliged to like you, to protect you, or not to abandon you? How many times have you stayed silent to keep the peace, but deep down hoped to be seen as someone mature, evolved, superior? Schopenhauer would say that all of this is disguised will. That same blind, selfish force that drives us, but now dressed in the elegant clothes of morality. And that is precisely what makes moral manipulation so dangerous, because it is almost invisible even to those who practice it. It is frightening to realize how often we use virtue as a bargaining chip. You are helpful to gain affection. You are patient to not lose your place in the group. You stay silent to avoid being excluded. And when these things don't happen, when you give and don't receive, resentment is born, silent, poisonous, corroding your soul from the inside out. Schopenhauer saw this as a human tragedy, because for him, the more we strive to appear virtuous, the more we risk distancing ourselves from what is genuine in us. True virtue, according to him, does not arise from conscious effort or calculation. It springs forth spontaneously when we recognize something essential, that all living beings share the same existential suffering. But when virtue becomes theater, it ceases to be compassion and transforms into a mechanism of control. You begin to expect the world to operate according to the rules of your sacrifice. You start to demand a return, even if you never ask openly. And goodness becomes emotional blackmail. A classic example? The Good Samaritan who does everything for others but keeps repeating, "After all I've done for you." This phrase is living proof that goodness, in this case, is not selfless. It is an investment, waiting for emotional dividends. And when those dividends do not come, it turns into frustration, hurt, even anger. And there is another, even crueler aspect. Society encourages this cycle. You are praised when you sacrifice yourself, when you swallow your pain, when you are always available. Few have the courage to question you. Why do you do all this? What are you wanting in return? Because admitting that our virtue sometimes serves to manipulate would be to admit that we are much less saintly than we like to believe. But Schopenhauer did not condemn humanity for this. He understood that this is the nature of will, to always seek to satisfy its interests, even if through disguised paths. What he proposes to us is not to abandon goodness, but to see clearly the true motivations behind it. Because only when you understand your impulses can you choose to act authentically and freely. And this leads us to one of the most liberating ideas in Schopenhauer's thought. True compassion does not arise from effort, nor from moralism. It emerges when we stop pretending and begin to see the pain of others as an extension of our own. And that is what we will talk about in the next part. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. We have now reached the point that separates, like an abyss, superficial morality from the brutal depth of Arthur Schopenhauer's thought, true compassion. Throughout his life, Schopenhauer observed human hypocrisy with merciless eyes. He clearly saw how, behind virtuous appearances, selfish desires, wills to power, and needs for validation are hidden. Yet, despite this almost cruel gaze, he did believe that there is something genuinely pure in human beings, something that does not arise from fear, moral obligation, or the desire for applause. And that something is true compassion. But beware, the compassion Schopenhauer speaks of has nothing to do with the superficial and sentimental version that society tends to display, full of beautiful phrases and emotional hashtags. For him, compassion is not crying for someone on the news, nor posting messages about universal love on social media. It is not saying, "I understand you," just because it looks good for our image. True compassion, according to Schopenhauer, arises when you feel, in your flesh, that another's pain is also your pain. It is when you see, beyond social masks, the same fundamental anguish that inhabits all living beings. The same blind will that generates desires, frustrations, losses, sufferings. He writes in The World as Will and Representation that compassion is the only true foundation of morality, because in it, the boundary between self and other dissolves. It is no longer I helping you. It is simply pain recognizing pain. It is life in a brief spark of lucidity, seeing itself in the other. Does it seem poetic? It is. But it is also profoundly practical, because when you begin to feel this real compassion, something transformative happens. You stop trying to appear good. You no longer need to force gestures of charity or live in the theater of moral perfection. Kindness begins to flow naturally, without calculation, without expectation of return. You help because you cannot do otherwise. You alleviate another's pain because you feel it is your own pain. And it is here that liberation lies. Because this spontaneous compassion destroys the illusion that morality is a rigid set of rules. It frees you from the anxiety of pleasing, the constant fear of failing, the exhaustion of living to maintain an immaculate image. You begin to realize that to act with true kindness, you do not need to deny who you are. You do not need to amputate your desires, your wills, or pretend that there is no darkness within you. On the contrary, it is precisely when you acknowledge your own darkness that you can look at others without judgment. You understand that no one is only virtue or only vice. That every human being, no matter how detestable they may seem, also carries fear, loneliness, and a desire to be accepted. And this generates not only compassion, but something even rarer: tolerance. Schopenhauer tells us, in other words, that true kindness only arises when you accept the simplest and most painful truth of all: you are also imperfect. And paradoxically, it is this imperfection that makes you someone capable of feeling real empathy. So, the issue is not to suppress your will or force yourself to be perfect. The issue is to learn to recognize your own selfish impulses without shame, without denial, and still choose to act with humanity. Not because you want to appear good, but because you know that if pain is won, relief must also be. Trying to be perfect all the time is not only impossible, but it is, in Schopenhauer's words, a brutal form of violence against oneself. You need to understand this deeply. Every time you force yourself to be immaculate, every time you stifle your anger, repress your desires, or swallow your pain to appear virtuous, you are harming yourself. You are betraying the most essential part of your humanity. You are distancing yourself not only from your authenticity, but from the only chance you have to experience true compassion, the kind that arises from the honest recognition of your own imperfection. Schopenhauer teaches us that the will, this blind and incessant force within us, will never be eradicated. You can try to bury it under tons of moralism. You can suffocate it under the weight of social expectations. You can even pretend it doesn't exist. But it will remain there, pulsating, pushing your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors. And the more you try to deny it, the more it manifests behind the scenes, silently sabotaging your life. The obsession with being good turns life into an internal battlefield. You live divided between who you truly are and who you think you need to be. And in that conflict, you lose peace, lose spontaneity, lose the joy of existence. Every little mistake becomes proof that you are not good enough. Every failure turns into guilt, shame, self-deprecation. But here is the most liberating truth that Schopenhauer leaves us. Real virtue does not arise from the effort to be perfect. It arises from the sincere acceptance of our own imperfection. When you stop fighting against your nature, you begin to see that everyone around you is also struggling. You recognize that every human being, without exception, carries desires, fears, contradictions. And it is precisely there, in that moment of raw humility, that genuine compassion arises. The will is still there, but now you see it, understand its games, and consciously choose not to be its slave. Imagine the relief of being able to say, I am not perfect, and that's okay. Imagine the weight that would lift from your shoulders if you no longer had to maintain the facade. If you could live authentically, make mistakes, get things right, love, feel anger, feel fear, without the constant obligation to always appear good. Because in the end, the paradox revealed by Schopenhauer is simple. The more you accept your own imperfection, the freer you become for genuine acts of kindness. There is nothing more beautiful than helping someone without expecting anything in return, and nothing more human than recognizing that, above all, you also need help, understanding, forgiveness. If any part of what I said here resonated with something in you, share it in the comments. And if this video brought you reflections or some relief, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Watch the next video. It is essential to continue this journey of self-discovery. See you there.